Hello everyone, and welcome back to this week's Nugget. First, I want to say thank you to Seth for sharing his thoughts last week regarding the roots of Abraham. Now, our memory text for this week comes from Genesis, it's chapter 15 and 2. But Abraham said, "Lord God, what will you give me, seeing as I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" Sabbaths Lesson hints at this idea that Abraham was afraid, which seems a little strange when you consider that Abraham just walked away from a great victory. Think about this for a moment. Here we have Abraham who chases down 4 kings and their armies, and he annihilates them in battle, and all Abraham had for an army was 300 of his servants. Now, I don't know about you, but I would call that a brave thing to do. So what's Abraham afraid of? In part, he's afraid of the future. Now here we have Abraham, who was called by God to leave everything and everyone he ever knew, to go to a place he'd never seen, based on the promise that God would not only give him enough land to hold an entire nation, but that he would actually be the father of that nation. So Abraham packs a bag, and sure enough, he finds himself in a place he'd never been. The problem was, he and Sarai were getting up in age, and if something didn't happen soon, they were both too old and would be too old to have a baby. So what's a God to do? Well, in Sunday's lesson, God wakes Abraham up one night, walks him outside his tent, points to the sky and says, "I promise you, your descendants will be like the stars in the sky." Then the Bible shares with us one of the most important verses there is regarding salvation. Genesis 15 and 6. "And Abraham believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith." This was unheard of. Back in the day, if you were a pagan, you had to prove to your God through your good works, your offerings and sacrifices, that you were good enough to be righteous, or you were righteous enough to be saved. And even then, you could do everything right and still not make it into the afterlife if your God didn't like you or didn't feel like saving you, or worse still, the gods didn't like you. But not Abraham's God. This God actually loves sinners. This God would do everything in his power to save and redeem the people who actually rebelled against him or offended him. That's not how the gods behaved. Why the pagan gods made you suffer for offending them. But Abraham's God, in godlike fashion, he practices this one thing. It's called grace, where God would do for sinners what they couldn't do for themselves. And all they had to do was believe. In the end, Abraham was able to believe God because he trusted what he knew to be true about God. The basis of all faith is not in the actual promises themselves, but in what we know to be true about the person making the promise. Well, that's our nugget for today. Thank you for stopping by. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow.